Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and I really thank the Trust because it is a true honor to be amongst such distinguished, passionate, enthusiastic collectors and museum professionals and preservationists. And I want to apologize ahead of time that Mr. Jobs did not play nicely with Mr. Gates, so the wording might be a little bit small. In 1740, an 18-year-old plantation manager in South Carolina wrote to the owner requesting West India indigo seeds for the following year. With limited education in botany, they achieved remarkable success and generously shared indigo seeds with fellow planters. 3 years later, the production of this crop skyrocketed from 5,000 pounds to 130,000 pounds, significantly shaping South Carolina history. The manager and entrepreneur, Eliza Pinckney, defied societal and legal norms of her time. South Carolina's aristocracy expected their young women to focus on the domestic crafts that would assist them in fulfilling their duties as wives and mothers, thus advancing their husband's legacy. Only widows and adult single women could own property and sign contracts, with few exceptions. Women's property and inheritance automatically transferred to her husband unless a trust had been established. Fortunately, Eliza and her husband, Charles Pinckney, shared a harmonious marriage since divorce was illegal in the state until 1949. Women's limited legal options and protection in the state before the 20th century did not impede their role in shaping Charleston's economic landscape through business ventures like owning boarding houses and taverns and operating a printing press. Today, a sampling of women will illustrate how they permeated every facet of Charleston's silver industry through their roles as financiers, retailers, craftswomen, consumers, and conservators. Women entrepreneurs were far from anomalies in the business landscape, particularly in England's silver industry. London Goldsmiths Company records reveal that 63 women registered their touch or maker's marks between 1697 and 1837. These women, often widows, were masters of their own shops and held to the same standards as their male counterparts. While a woman's identity often emerged upon her husband's death, her education often began as the daughter of a silversmith, helping in the family business. A daughter often married her father's journeyman, embracing the principle of teamwork to ensure the prosperity of the business. After her husband's passing, a widow depended on the business's continuation to support herself and her family. Her independent identity often faded again upon remarriage. In England, a widow registered her mark, occasionally placing her initials in a diamond or rhombus-shaped cartouche known as a widow's lozenge, shown on the left. Let's see. Right here. And here we have 3 widows that decided not to use the widow's lozenge. Women master silversmiths represented a small portion of females in the trade. Women and girls provided inexpensive labor sources for the industry's numerous processes and specialized fields. They predominantly served as burnishers, skilled artisans used to put a mirror finish on the silver surface in the final production. Their hands could access smaller spaces. George Dodd illustrated an example of a burnisher shown in the center in his 1847 sketch. The 1747 publication, The London Tradesman, suggested careers in gold and silver button making for daughters, since it did not require a great deal of strength. Women also distinguished themselves in the craft by making casters, buckles, and spurs. These women subcontractors then sold their finished products to retailers, who oftentimes is the only mark adorned on the piece. Few women achieved the professional acclaim enjoyed by Hester Bateman and Elizabeth Godfrey. Bateman expanded her late husband's business as a chain maker to employ 300 artisans, all the while illiterate. Elizabeth Godfrey, the daughter of a silversmith and twice widowed of a silversmith, attracted the patronage of dukes, peers, and other aristocrats. The diverse and often overlooked roles of women in Britain's silver industry likely served as a model in its colony of South Carolina. Family precedent and strategic marriages provided the necessary credit and materials for new silversmiths to set up shop. Moreau Saracen and James Spear opted for the latter and married very well. This side-handled coffee pot, the only known Southern example made in 1740 for John Cumming Ball, bears the mark of Moreau Saracen working 1730 to 1761. Saracen, born in 1710 and relatively unknown, married Elizabeth Dowse in Charlestown, Massachusetts in August 1730. Elizabeth was the daughter of a wealthy landowner by the name of Jonathan Dowse and his second wife, Catherine Winslow Herbert. That also made Elizabeth the niece of the preeminent Massachusetts silversmith Edward Winslow. Perhaps Elizabeth and Moreau met while Moreau was in Winslow's employment. The harsh tone of Jonathan Dowse's will, which ensured that Elizabeth and her children had complete control over their inheritance, quote, without the consent or direction of her current husband, may be influenced by the likelihood that Elizabeth was pregnant at her wedding. The Saracens moved to South Carolina in late 1731, provided an opportunity to rebrand themselves as worthy members of Charleston's aristocracy. They likely used Elizabeth's resources to acquire 500 acres on South Carolina's Black River and enslaved labor that they mortgaged and sold. Moreau joined the Two Bits Club, and this rice spoon in the Charleston Museum collection bears the insignia and motto of that club. In 1734, Moreau ordered a suit with silver buttons. And just think about the extravagance for a minute of an accomplished silversmith, perfectly capable of making buttons. He's ordering someone else to make them for him. The 1746 ad advertised Moreau's ability to engrave gentlemen's coat of arms on plate and in seals, and manufacture motto and mourning rings, all vital hallmarks of nobility. After Elizabeth's passing in 1754, Moreau increased his advertising efforts significantly, involving his 24-year-old son, Jonathan, in a bid to preserve the legacy of the family business. The amount of resources that Elizabeth provided to the business is purely speculative, unlike Savannaian Laura Ann Wood Spear. Laura Ann, born in 1824 in Savannah, was the daughter of Ezekiel and Susan Wood. Ezekiel died in December 1832, and his will established a trust for his daughter, with Susan serving as trustee. 8 years later, 16-year-old Laura Ann married 23-year-old James Spear. James was a newcomer to Georgia from New Jersey and the son of a watchmaker and silversmith. This is his stamp residing at the Charleston Museum, and the letters are actually in reverse. The image on the bottom that you see is how that would transfer onto silverware. 2 months later, James took out notes from his bride's trust, totaling just over $2,600, and opened a shop with his partner, James Jones. The Spears had 2 surviving daughters, Laura Ann, later she married Welsh, and Antoinette. They moved to Charleston before Antoinette's birth in 1845, and Spear advertised imported fine watches and a complete assortment of jewelry and silverware, like this creamer and sugar adorned with iconography from South Carolina with the shields at the base of the palmetto tree. Laura Ann died on September 16th, 1851. Her will bequeathed all of her assets to her daughters, then ages 6 and 8, named her brother as administrator, and noted her husband's debt, which was between $2,000 and $3,000 at the time. Susan Wood sued her son-in-law to recover the loans and claimed he misappropriated her granddaughter's funds for use in his business. James, as his daughter's guardian, demanded that Wood provide all the funds owed to his daughter and cease the ongoing lawsuit. And you thought your Thanksgiving conversations were dramatic. The case went to South Carolina's Supreme Court, who sided with Spear. It ordered Wood to give her son-in-law $620, and as a consolation, Spear did have to obtain a surety bond that protected his daughter's interest. By 1860, Spear developed that initial $2,600 note into stock worth $35,000, which would be $1.3 million today. He also had an enslaved laborer and a dog for companionship. He acquired number 30 South Battery, shown here, that same year for $5,000. When Spear died intestate, 6 years after the war, his 27-page-long estate inventory was appraised at $23,000 with an array of shop tools and scrap silver. Elizabeth Saracen and Laura Ann Spear were, at the very least, silent partners. The next 3 women involved in the craft gained recognition through widowhood and a legal declaration known as a femme sole trader. George Atwell immigrated from Rhode Island to Charleston in 1828 and advertised manufacturing, repairing, and importing jewelry and merchandise. He married native-born Mary E. Castigon, and in 1838, George lost his shop to the Great Fire of Charleston that year. He died 5 months later. Mary, with 6 mouths to feed, administered his estate, valued at $4,000, and announced the business's continuation under her name, with repairs neatly and expediently executed by an experienced workman. In 1841, Mary remarried an accomplished French painter and retired from the silver business a year later. They moved to Texas, where Mary died in 1886. Extant pieces like this cup with her mark are exceedingly rare, since she was only in business on her own for 4 years. The presence of the secondary marks up at the very top of an eagle and a man's head indicate that this was probably a piece that was retailed by Mary. Marie Louise Simonette, known as Heloise, likely gained her business acumen from her mother, which operated a very successful dry goods store on King Street. 25-year-old Heloise married newcomer Louis Boudreau, a skilled silversmith from Haiti, in October 1811. During the next 13 years, the Boudreaux expanded their family and business, with their modest shop flourishing into a major manufactory, engaging a number of the best silversmiths making silverware and importing English and New York goods. The state commissioned Louis Boudreau to create this elegant map case presented to Lafayette during his state tour. Twice, Louis published notices appointing Heloise as his attorney in his absence, signifying his trust in her and her keen abilities to handle their family business. When Louis died in 1827, Heloise was appointed executrix of the estate, totaling, in today's value, $250,000. She promptly announced the continuation of the jewelry business in all facets under her name, supported by skilled craftsmen. She made regular trips to New York and Philadelphia, and secondary marks appear on some of her pieces, like this ladle and spoon in museum collections. She also advertised for repair work executed with neatness and dispatch, and for old gold and silver necessary in manufacturing. She not only lost a husband, but she also lost a skilled artisan. Perhaps Heloise decided to enhance her team of craftsmen by purchasing an enslaved labor Tom from silversmith Nathaniel Vernon 2 years after her husband's death. We wonder, did Catherine Grady, who was indentured to Heloise, work in the home, the shop, or both? Heloise died tragically in a steamboat accident off of Cape Hatteras in October 1837, and her will lists 3 heirs: her mother, her son Charles, and her daughter, Emma Leroy. Irma Eugenie Boudreau, born 1814, married Narcisse Leroy around 1835. Heloise's will mentions a previous advancement of $7,000 in cash and real estate to the Leroys, and specified that Emma's inheritance was independent from her husband's control. Emma purchased some of the Boudreau stock and published her intent to operate as a femme sole trader. This legal designation enabled a married woman to become as if sole or unmarried regarding her economic status. As such, she could sign contracts, she could sue and be sued. It required her husband's consent. Emma adopted her parents' business model and offered an extensive array of silver inventory, home furnishings, imported luxury goods, and repair services. Unfortunately, Emma's intent for a legacy business coincided with the depression that fell after the Great Panic of 1837. Emma sold her household furnishings and stock in a sheriff's sale by 1840 to settle creditors' lawsuits and other debts. The Leroys left Charleston shortly thereafter and resurfaced in France 50 years later with Emma's death in 1892. Those sparse records invite speculation about the amount of time these women that we've discussed spent at the bench. A letter from a father to a daughter offers a first-hand account of a woman silversmith working in 19th century Charleston. John Mood, born 1792, the eldest son of Peter and Mary Mood, learned the craft from his father, and he joined the family business in 1814. Shortly thereafter, he ventured out on his own, and his skillful hands and sterling reputation led to numerous commissions, like this matching pair of pictures for the Lafayette Artillery to their captain, as well as orders for cavalry equipment from the Confederate government. Mood described a military order in his 1861 letter to his daughter Amelia Wilbur. I have been very busy at work, burnishing buttons, Martha assisting me. I have finished nearly 4,000, which I gilt and a few weeks since about 3,000, which were tin-plated. It is very profitable work. I have more work than I can do of a military nature, and it is very light work, which suits me exactly. Although I am closely engaged all day, I do not feel scarcely weary at night. And Martha and myself has been, as I said, burnishing until 11 o'clock at night. Martha was most likely John's daughter-in-law, Martha King Mood. She was born in Georgia to Tabitha and Thomas King and married John's son, Dr. James Reeder Mood. The couple soon moved to Charleston by 1861, Martha was 4 months pregnant with her 5th child. John certainly compensated Martha for her work, especially since she was caring for John's grandchildren, aged 8 years old to 15 months old, while her husband participated in the cavalry drills. After John's death and the war's end, Martha and James took in boarders, including an engraver, Henry Reading, and his family. And once widowed, Martha ended up living with her son William in Summerville, South Carolina. This buckle, the only one that I know of, is brass, and from the Mood shop, it would have been worn by an enlisted man. And as a side note, I borrowed this piece for this image from a dear friend and a major collector, and he said, "Do you want to take it to your group?" So I have it with me during the break if anybody wants to see it. Having explored the lives of a few women who worked behind the counter and in the back of the shop, our attention turns to the style influencers that contributed to the economy through conspicuous consumption. Rebecca Bruton Mott owned a reticulated Irish Rococo sugar basket, a reminder of her Irish ancestry. It avoided her sanctioned house fire, which forced the surrender of British troops that were sheltering inside her home. Mary Pinckney gifted a stunning green enameled French guilloche watch and fob, right here, to her niece Elizabeth Izard Pinckney. Perhaps Mary Pinckney's gift was influenced by Margaret Izard Manigault's chatelaine, purchased from the London firm of Green and Ward in 1792 for £50. Now, the acquisition of these green enameled pieces and personal timepieces holds great significance. Historically, only the affluent could afford articles made of green dye due to the costly production process. Choosing personalized timepieces enabled these women to align themselves with royalty as the art of horology gained prominence under George III. Charlotte Broughton presented the Boudot pat boat that we saw a little bit earlier to her great niece, Mary Mott Haig, upon her birth. Eliza Lucas Pinckney owned this magnificent brooch with diamonds, sapphires, emeralds, rubies, and amethysts. And finally, Pinckney presented this monumental English sterling tea urn to her daughter Harriet upon her marriage. And our opportunity to study these decorative arts and individuals who created them is largely due to centuries of conservation efforts. And enslaved laborers, usually the very first conservators, are central to that study. And there were 2 or 3 that I saw mentioned. Mary, noted as a house wench and a pastry cook, may have polished the 18th century silver epergne that resides at the Middleton plantation. And Maria may have polished the silver bequest listed in Catherine McFarland's will before she herself was enslaved to Catherine McFarland Mood, John Mood's wife. Today we have explored how women shaped Charleston's silver industry by providing financial backing, working as agents and artisans, influencing style, and preserving objects. Women, however, have often been overlooked and excluded from this field's historical narrative. E. Milby Burton, in his landmark book, 1942's South Carolina Silversmiths, lists only 3 women as silversmiths, while he noted that 3 also advertised working in the trade. Martha Johns Burnisher is excluded from all lists of Charleston metal workers published to date. In recent years, a growing movement has emerged to recognize and promote marginalized groups that have long been underrepresented. And hopefully this shift will provide meaningful change. An article that appeared in 1820, Savannah Daily Republican, offers insight. The writer expresses astonishment that French women engaged in every detail of the trades. He penned, "I remarked that French ladies must have great talents, thus to learn a trade in the honeymoon, which had employed their husbands during a 7-year apprenticeship, and that I suppose she would be an equal expert in any trade if upon becoming a widow she married a husband in some other field." The response was, "Ah, monsieur, we endeavor to assist our spouses in every way. It is our only pleasure. Their cares are our cares. Their interests are ours. And if it is our calamity to become widows and meet another good man, we do the best we can for him also." Thank you.